Okay, so as warned on Monday, I got the email today. The thing opens up at noon. So, is anybody in here still having trouble logging into Hawks, or we're all good? Okay, if you are, right after class, just stop by and we'll make sure you get all set up. Okay, so yeah, if you're still having trouble right after class, come up to me and we'll get you all set up in there. Because I'll probably be doing the list and stuff tomorrow. So, all right. Well, let's deal with the monkey of the hour. So one of the cool things about being an election season, well, cool things about being a national election. We always have an election in November, and actually the local elections are more important than the national ones, but the national ones get all the news and all the polling and all the data and everything else. So last night there was a debate. And of course, right after the debate, the campaigns want to know who won the debate. Okay. So I'm not going to ask because depending on which way you lean depends on how you're going to end up voting. So that's not what we actually care about in this situation. So when we were talking in chapter 1 about collecting data and stuff like that, is a internet poll a good, reliable source of data collection? Why? Yep. Yep. Huh? Bots. Yep. What else? Typically, yep. What's this one? It's politics polls. Let's see what this one's at currently. So let's see. Yeah, I can't find the newest one. That's okay because I'm not on X. So last night, basically right after the debate, this was shared. 64,264 people took the poll. Is that a good number of people? Well, think about when we were talking about some of the other polls, how many people were actually in those polls? Like a couple thousand, right? So there's 64,000 people that took this poll. But this is an internet poll, right? And I think the debate ended at like 10:30. It wasn't very much longer. Like this was pretty soon after the debate happened that this poll got released. And it says Trump won. Yes.
Well, that's the thing is that you can't know that whoever did this poll, it's how many people didn't even watch the debate.
Correct. There's another one. Oh, these are all right-leaning platforms. There's a reason for that one. This happens to be Trump's post. And this is another one. So all these were like right after the debate ended. Don't worry, I have another one. Here's another one. So don't worry, I have one that has Harris winning too. So this one had about 8,000 people that responded to this one. So you're going to see a lot of this. Okay. This is the spin factory that comes out after debates. So see if I can get. I'm not going to be able to find that one. So I remember in the 2020 election, there was a poll that had Joe Jorgensen, who's the Libertarian candidate, actually winning the election because all the Libertarians went and voted on that poll really quickly to get the numbers up. And that's what happens with these. Like the staunch supporters will go and do a ton of those polls. And most of these polls are on either Twitter or Facebook and those type of things, and they get shared out by the campaigns, and everybody's going to rush to vote to get their candidate up to have that information. I was looking for this one to see if I could find the actual, because this was taken so close after the election. I was looking to see if I can find out what the current numbers are because it was open for a day. What was this one? Political. Oh, that was that one. Politicals. See if I can find the current one. And this one still, I don't know what political polls leans, but now we're up to almost 255,000 people. And that's where we're at. So it's still pretty similar to that. So you can start to see how they'll spin these things. They'll use them to say which way won, which way didn't. And we saw in January, or not in January, was it July? Yeah, it was in July. Then the last debate happened that it had a huge impact on the election. After that debate happened, everybody was pushing for Biden to drop out. So that his debate performance massively changed the political landscape after that point. So you can see how polling and the feeling after these types of things can have an impact on things going forward. And understanding the spin, understanding where things are coming from really will help you dissect what's happening. It's like, don't look at what Trump puts out. Don't look what Harris puts out. They're going to put out stuff that's going to be complementary to each of them. That's the way it works. It's like, look at the general overview. Look at those more neutral groups that are doing those phone polls and those type of things that would get a little bit better accuracy. Look at the longer term polls. The snap polls and stuff like that give a general understanding, but it's not valid data, which is the thing that we really want to look at. All right, now we're done with that. What were the 4 levels of measurement? Yes. All right. Somebody else. What does nominal mean? What types of data is nominal? Correct. The big key is you can't calculate it. It's like can't put it in order. It's just data. All right. Yes.
It's like it's names and stuff like that, but you can put it in order. You can numerize.
Right. So ordinal data we can put in order. Very good. What does interval data do? What makes interval data different? Yeah. Right. We can do the arithmetic difference is meaningful, so we can subtract it. Okay. And what does ratio mean? Yes. Ratio, we can do division. All right. So your ratio division matters. So we can do that twice as much or half as much, those type of things. Okay. Good. All right. So qualitative data, those are your qualities. Those are your nominal and ordinal information. Quantitative is interval and ratio. So those are quantitatives or quantities. Quantities you can do those calculations on. All right. All right. Let's go back before most of you were born. Okay, so read this little paragraph, and I want you to write down all the different variables that they're looking for. What are all the different variables that they're collecting data on? If you can't read it on the board, this happens to be problem number 14 in the book on page 54, if you have your book or your ebook. But I can't make it much bigger than it's on the board right now. So write down all the different variables that they're collecting. Sorry. All right. Next to each of those variables, I want you to write if they're quantitative, or qualitative. So are they quantitative or qualitative? All right. What's one of the variables? Okay. Gender. Qualitative or quantitative? Qualitative. Everybody agree? Okay. What's another one? Okay. Qualitative or quantitative? Why? You're right. It is qualitative. It's also not a number. Quantitative has to be a number. If it's not a number, you can't do a calculation with it. Quantities, you can do calculations with. So that's the easiest way to determine the two of them. It's not all, you can have things that are numbers that are qualitative, but you can't have a thing that's not a number be quantitative. All right, what's another variable? Okay, qualitative or quantitative? Yep. Yes, that's the next question I'm going to ask. So that is qualitative. And yes, that one actually is the first one that is ordinal, because I can put that in order. The other two were nominal. They're just data. All right, what's any other information that they're asking you? Yes. Okay. That is also qualitative. Is it, since I got asked this question or told this already for the other ones, is it ordinal, nominal, ratio, or interval? Yeah. Why? Yeah. Yeah. The ranks has meaning. You can put them in order. So that's the key. It's like anytime you have like starred ratings or those type of things, like you can put them in order. I can assign numbers to those and put them in a specific order, and that would have some meaning to it. I can't do calculations with it. Subtracting excellent from poor doesn't do anything. So that's why it doesn't go to the interval method or the interval level. Yeah. Yep. And basically every level of measurement levels up. So anything in interval can be ordered. Okay, so an interval can be is ordinal by definition. You can put it in order, but it has that extra piece that I can do that calculation with. I can add or subtract it, and that would have meaning. Same thing with ratio. That's one step above interval, where I can actually subtract them. That has meaning, but also I can do the divisions, and that also has meaning. Okay. All right. Let's look at. Let's do one more of these. Let's do this one. All right, same thing. So write down the variables, qualitative or quantitative, and then determine if they are nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio for each of the variables. All right. What's one of the variables? Height. Or qualitative or quantitative? Quantitative. Okay. Is it nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Can I say somebody's twice as tall as somebody else? Would that have meaning? Yeah, so this would be ratio. All right, what's another one? Weights. Ordinal or nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Okay, that is correct. And that would also make it what? Right, quantitative. Yes. The next one.
State.
Okay.
Nominal.
The state. And this one is nominal, you said?
Yes.
Correct. Can't really put those in order. Okay. Is there any other ones? Yeah. Okay. Kind of that one. That is also nominal. Okay. Any other ones?
Income,
Yeah. Income of the parents. What's that one?
ratio.
Yeah.
Quantitative,
And that would be quantitative. Correct. Any other ones?
home residence,
Okay. What type is that one?
ordinal,
This one's debatable. Why did you say ordinal?
measured by city, town, or pool.
Okay. So can I put those in order? So I guess it depends on how, like, so that's why I said this one's debatable. Like, depending on how you look at it. We were talking about like excellent, good, very good, those type of things you can put necessarily in order and that'd be fine. So the question is okay, do you look at city, could you change like city to 1, town to 2, and rural to 3 and be able to rank them that way? That's why I said it's debatable. I would personally say it's nominal, but I could see a case where somebody could say that it is ordinal. All right. Anybody notice anything weird about the survey? Yeah.
I'm heckling on the city, town, and rural because I have a feeling that they're assuming that the rural is lesser.
Well, okay. So that's where we're going to get to the next part of my next question, the why I like this question. Anybody have any issues with this survey or with this data collection? Yeah. Okay. Why do you think that's the case?
Carry that to be more important than whatever the mom's application is, or they assume that the mom is working.
Okay. Yes.
Adding to that, I think it's because women probably weren't working at that time. So
Yeah, it was the 1800s. Women weren't working. And if women were working, they most likely didn't have a husband. So they were mostly teachers or nurses at that point, and they were single women. So their kids, if they had them, weren't going to West Point. Okay? Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Oh.
they couldn't own property either. I mean, that was.
Yeah, it was a lot of, yeah. I did find it interesting that they asked occupation of the father and then income of the parents. That I found interesting. And the only reason that is because sometimes women came with money from their families, especially if they came from wealthier families and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I just thought they were asking for a lot of different kinds of information. Like height and weight are completely different questions than like income and revenue.
Okay. So the question is now, why do you think those were added in there? Yeah. Actually, I'll ask them over there. Yes, you in the back.
Because at the time, like what you can afford for food was kind of like dependent. It also included in what your height or what your weight is. If you can't afford a lot of food, your weight's going to be less.
Yep.
So if your income is down, then
And so this was looking at dietary changes. So
It'd also be like super quiet because West Point is like top school. It's
Yeah.
an exception to have someone that was not a part of the elite. I mean, that's the reason why there were so many Southerners going to West Point because they were cotton kings.
Yeah.
That was where the wealthy came from at the time.
Yep.
So it would be dietary changes in the antebellum South would be like that would because that's not indicative of what the majority of people are eating on what they're like.
absolutely. So yeah, so they were looking at how as the food quality and stuff got better, did that impact the heights and weights of the cadets that were coming in? And they were looking at the cadets because these were the prime specimens of humanity at that point. These were the people who were in the best shape, had the best lifestyle, those type of things. So you could get a lot of information about how people were living back then. But that's one of those things when you start to look at, even looking at data, looking at polls and stuff like that, is that you need to look at, again, where they came from and who's doing them and why they're doing them, those type of things. So it's like, even if this was done today, the questions would be still asked the same way, because back then those things didn't happen. So it's like they weren't looking at that type of stuff. So city, town, or rural, that makes a difference. If you were in a city, you basically had to have money at that point. You weren't the plantation owners. That's the rural people. That's that rural thing. So it's like you have to look at where they're coming from, and does that have an impact on the health of the people, the soldiers coming into the West Point? So yeah, West Point, the Annapolis for the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and the Coast Guard Academy. Those are the 4 military academies. And you need to, even today, you need to, most of the people that go to those are your more wealthier people, because there's one piece of paper thing that you need that's very hard for a normal person to get. You need a congressional appointment. You need to get a letter from your congressman or senator to get into the military academies. And unless you have connections, those are not the easiest things in the world to get. So, all right. Good. I think, does everybody have a good understanding of the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio? Yes.
So the rural is not necessarily like mentioned earlier, from the Cotton Kings. So that
That would be
would
rural.
also mean,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, that's what I'm saying. Like, you couldn't separate like city, town, rural as high income, middle income, low income. Like, you couldn't separate it that way, because it's where they're coming from and the environment they're coming from, more than, like, today you would look at the city as being the wealthy ones, the rural, the ones who are working on the farmers typically are not as wealthy, because we don't have a lot of family owned farms. We do actually more in Connecticut than we do nationwide. Most of the nationwide, the big farms are owned by corporations and stuff now. So they're just like a business being run. And actually, depending on which cities you're looking at, like if we're looking at the cities in Connecticut, our cities typically are lower income, where our suburban towns, which would be considered towns outside, are where more of your wealth is. But if you look at like Boston or New York, the city part of it is where most of your wealth is. But they look at metropolitan areas. So like Boston is actually very small. Well, when you think about Boston, you're thinking about the whole metropolitan area. So if you were thinking of the same type of situation down here, you guys don't have a city like an actual city down here. But like if you're looking at like Hartford, we look at the metropolitan area, you would include West Hartford, East Hartford, New England, like you'd include all the towns around it, and that would give you that more of that income base. That's why most when they look at it, Hartford metropolitan area is actually one of the wealthiest in the area. Like, but the city of Hartford is one of the poorest in the country. So, yeah.
Yeah, and also, the thing is that back then, at that time, in the South, the rural was the richer part, and
Oh, absolutely.
the urban were the more poor.
Yeah, it changed. It's changed since then, but yeah, back then,
the
absolutely.
North was the exact opposite.
Mhm.
Rural were the poor areas, urban were the
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Let's go on to 2.3. So 2.3 looks at 2 different types of data. So we've got time series data and cross-sectional data. So a time series data is measurements that are taken at some point or for some process. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything in particular, but some process that is spaced equally over time. A lot of times when you look at these, you'll hear these called longitudinal studies, where they're looking at a specific group of people and they're looking at that information like every 6 months or every year or every 5 years, whatever it happens to be. But they're looking at the same group of people every single time. So a time series does that over time. So I think I put the American League batting championships, because it's baseball time season. And I like baseball. Yes, I know it's football coming up, but I'm not a huge football fan. So this is looking at the batting champions over time. So we're looking at one very specific piece of information, and we're citing it over that time period. That's what a time series is. That's basically all a time series is. So we can use this to look at a variety of different things. So this is another time series. You can tell because it's basically got times on the bottom. That's a really good indication that this is a time series. What's this graph about? Okay. What are some of the information you can get from this graph? Yes. Okay. What's some information we can get? So what do you think, based on this graph, what do you think's happening? All right. Are they increasing, decreasing, staying the same?
They increase from 98 to like 20, let's say 2010, that area, and then they started sort of fluctuating.
All right. So it's definitely jumping up and down a lot more at the end. Our peaks are a little bit higher, but the low points are jumping down. Yes.
Like, overall, it's been a gradual decrease. Some years are lower than others. There's still like a gradual slope up.
Okay.
The periods of more acres burned is getting longer and longer.
Yeah. All right. Is this graph a time series? Okay, I'm pretty sure every one of you have seen this graph at some point in the past. This is the wonderful climate change graph. What are some things you notice about it? I'm looking for a very specific one. Okay. So they use this is the difference of the average from 1901 to 2000. So they took the average temperature basically in the 1900s and used that as the baseline. So before the 1900s, it was a little lower than that. And then, so you have the lower part, you have the higher part, which balances out. That's why that ends up being 0. So it's definitely getting warmer in the 2000s based on this. Is this a time series graph? Okay. What do you notice about this one?
Back to the Romans. A little bit after the Romans.
Yeah, a little bit after those 500. This goes back at 1500 years. Does it look as dramatic as this one does? It's going up, but we can see some peaks.
How did they get this?
Ah, good question. So today, so this graph right here, they collect the data. They have sensors and stuff, right? So good.
Primarily like crop yields and things like that we get records, because they kept records of that, especially in like the feudal period, especially Chinese did.
Yep, crop records. There's 2 other ways they can do it too.
Oh, soil, taking the soil samples and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, they can do. They typically use ice cores. Actually, they'll do ice cores, which will tell the temperature. They'll also tell oxygen level, carbon dioxide levels, those type of things. Tree rings. The bigger the tree ring, the more the tree grows, which typically represents more wetter years, which would be a little bit cooler, typically. So there's lots of little data and stuff like that that they can collect from nature to be able to get that data. But it's also why you see that dark line in the middle, right? That's an estimation. The uncertainty is the color around it. So it could have been as high as here, or it could have been as low as down here. Like that's the thing. We don't know. So you have, because that data is not precise, we don't have an actual collection value for it. We have that level of uncertainty that we need to look into. And that's why that information is there. So you have a plus or minus that's based on it. When you look at on this part of the graph over here, we see the dots. The dots are the actual records that were collected. And then that blue line is, again, an estimation based on all that collected points. But like we have some peaks up here, and then we also have some lower numbers down here, depending on where that data was collected or who it was collected by. So they use that line to be able to like that. It's like the line of best fit. They're estimating it after that point. So you can start to see changes. It's like these two graphs would represent basically the same type of thing, but depending on how you look at that data, depends on how you can influence opinion one way or another. So, and I think like that's the one thing, like I don't care which way you believe, which way you want to go. It doesn't make any difference to me. What I want you to do is I want you to be more critical of when people show information. I want you to be able to ask those questions like, okay, which hypograph is this? Where are they looking at? Like, do we really know what's happening back here? We have a general idea, but we don't know exactly. And it's like, and yeah, it's definitely going up after the industrial age. It's like, it's there. So it's like looking at where the data is coming from, who's showing it to you, what their biases are and why they're showing you this and what they want from it. Because in the end, everybody wants money. So it's like, what's the piece that's coming from it? Yeah.
There's a weird like spike downward in like 1900, I think.
Right over here?
Yeah.
Oh, there?
Yeah. It's like a weird spike downward. What happened there?
Hold on, let me see. So let's look at the other one. The other one's going to give you a little bit more. So that's where we're right through here.
Yeah.
Well, we went to war.
Less people. I don't know.
Probably a little. Well, we're still doing a lot. Honestly, I don't know. I'm thinking of like back things in history, and I'm like, I can't really tell you. I don't know.
It was when we started using oil too, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely.
Oil.
Well, yeah. You definitely get that spike once the automobile and the more the industrial age really starts coming into play. You definitely see a lot bigger of a spike in those things. So, but no, it's definitely changing. That is the most definite happening. So
I was thinking about this today.
here's the global mean temperatures for 500,000 years. What do you notice happens after every major spike? There's a major drop. And what do you think the little snowflakes are? Those are ice ages. Earth likes to balance. You have a spike, and what happens is the water melts, water reflects, it starts to reflect or absorb more sunlight, heats up, then causes the balance to tip the other direction, which then causes your ice age. Yes.
I was gonna say, do you think it also has to do with the acceleration period? Also has to do with, so I was thinking about this today. Now is like a great leap forward, trying to, well, post after that, where China and India are really trying to industrialize too, because it takes place. It starts, we start seeing a lot more of a spike in like the 60s.
Yeah, so we're definitely like we look at it as very European and American centric. We are doing a lot better in terms of our carbon emissions and stuff like that. The developing nations are typically using a lot more, like we were back in the late 1800s. It was like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we were using a lot more because we were just starting to industrialize. So yes, China and India definitely do a lot more of the carbon emissions nowadays than we do because they're still industrializing and are not as efficient as we are right now. They're a lot more efficient in other ways than we are because our systems are a lot older in some situations. Our infrastructure is a lot older than most of the more modern countries because they built it more recently. So that has an impact on it as well. And just the number of people over there too. There are well over 1 billion people in each of those countries. So that will definitely take a difference. All right. So those are time series graphs. The other type of graph or other type of data that we can see is known as cross-sectional data. And you notice I don't have a graph for this because I have to find one. Because the book didn't have one. Cross-sectional graphs looks at data collected at the exact same time period over a group of areas. Okay, so in this case, they're looking at life expectancy at birth in 2015. So while the time series graphs, we can make a nice group by the times, and we could typically do nice line charts because time is one of those things that is continuous. Cross-sectional data graphs or cross-sectional data typically do not lend themselves to line graphs because the information between Afghanistan and Australia doesn't mean anything. Okay. What type of graphs would lend themselves to these? A scatter plot or a bar graph? Yeah, would be the more likely expectation for these. The one thing you would, so when you're looking at the difference between the two, so this is where nominal and ordinal and those type of things come into play. These are data points, which obviously the question is can I put these in order? Could we put these in order? What's the variable? Okay, and country. We have two variables. And it's the relationship between the two, right? So I can order this by life expectancy. Could I order it by country? No. So depending on how you want to look at the graph, depends on how you would want to put it. If we're going to do a bar graph, I'd probably just list the countries at the bottom and put the bars up. I could order it by life expectancy and put them in order from life expectancy if I wanted to. You don't have to. You could put these are actually in alphabetical order. So again, it depends on what you want to show. If you want to show a nice little rise in the graph that's going up at the end, put them in life expectancy order. And if I was going to do a scatter plot, I'd probably do it that way. So this way there's some order to the dots. They're just not all over the place. So this is where one of those things, like when you're looking at the graphs, you can start to look at how you'd actually want to show those types of graphs. Trying to find a nice. So even this one. So that's a pie chart, right? But that actually is also cross-sectional data. It's the population in 2014 by borough. So they took one time period and they split it up into the different boroughs. Now, they're not giving you the actual population numbers. They're giving it to you as percentages, but it still is a cross-sectional data. See if I can find another nice one. That's not what I wanted to do. Um, Cross-sectional or time series? Why? Correct. They're looking at one group. It's a very large group, but they're looking at one group over different years. Okay. Even though it's a bar graph, it's still cross-sectional. I mean, it's still time series in that respect. Time series or cross-sectional? Why?
Because there's no like year or time. Yeah, it's just sales.
So, and they're looking at, I would suspect of this one, so that's the calls targeted and that's sales. So they're looking at one group or they're looking at a type. So this would be like the problem that we're looking at with like Afghanistan, United States, the life expectancy. This would be that one variable, and then that would be the second variable. So
I feel like that's kind of
it is. And there is a slight. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's shift. There's a slight upward trick to it. So there's more like the lower ends. So it's not, if we actually looked at the data and actually did the analysis of the actual best fit, is probably not a great correlation. But there is definitely some correlation to it. So. Trying to find one more. Oh, this is a nice graph. I'm trying to pick different like style graphs so you can see a bunch of different ones. We're going to talk about more graphs and stuff in chapter 3, but time series or cross-sectional. And don't take where it says cross-sectional area at the top as it being a cross-sectional graph automatically. They're just looking at area of the things. So cross-sectional or time series. Yeah. Why?
No real time.
There's no real time to it. Anybody know what type of graph this is? This is a logarithmic graph. So most of your graphs that you'll see, the boxes are very evenly spaced. Everything is equal. You'll notice in this respect that it goes from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000, and the lines are getting closer together. This is logarithmic. So while this looks like a nice straight line, it's because it's logarithmic that it is. Otherwise, you'd actually end up seeing this massive spike. So on a logarithmic graph, it can take those hockey stick type graphs and spread it out so you can actually look at it and analyze it a little bit better. So that's what this type of graph is called. All right. Let's do. All right. Because I did so much graph on the information the other day, I think we're actually good today. Any other questions on chapter 2? Okay. I think from what I'm hearing, at least from the people who are talking, and nobody else is saying that they have totally lost. I think you got a good understanding of that. We're going to go into chapter 3 next week, which will be a lot more of the graphs and stuff like that. And we'll start there. Please, if you have not fixed Hawks, make sure you're in there and set up. If you're struggling getting Hawks, stick around for afterwards and come see me and we'll get you set up. Other than that, I will see you on Monday.